Hello, everyone. This is Sal Albanese. Welcome to another edition of Running Against the Wind. I have a really interesting guest today. Someone who was just had an impressive victory for the city council. She's the newly elected council member from an area that I have a great affinity for because I represented it for 15 years. The district is a little different now, and Kayla will talk about that, but Bay Ridge is still within the boundaries of the council district, and I have family there. My mother lives there. My sisters live there. I'm right across the water, so I'm on Staten Island, and I'm there a lot. So are my grandkids. I've always paid a lot of attention to representing the area, obviously, because I lived there for so many years and I represented the neighborhood. And I'm really excited about Kayla's ascendancy to the city council. I think she's going to do a great job. I hear great things about her. So welcome, Kayla Santosuosso. And let me begin by asking.
Wow.
So that's the child.
Perfect.
You could tell I was born in Italy, right?
That was beautiful. It's rarely that beautiful when someone says it.
Ask you, how did somebody who was born to an Italian American family in Ohio wind up in Bay Ridge? Can you start us off with that?
Yeah, certainly. So, I came to New York for college. It was pretty clear to me, before the age of 18 that I wasn't going to stay in northeastern Ohio. It was a great place to grow up, but as we say about Ohio, for a lot of people, it's a great place to grow up and a great place to leave. So, I was very lucky. I grew up in a small business owning family. My dad owned an Italian restaurant, which was the case with his brothers and his parents and his grandparents. So I grew up in that business, and then my mom
So,
was
Kayla,
a ballerina.
is the restaurant still there?
Yeah, yeah, still going strong. Yeah.
Wow.
So he owns and operates it. I mean, he's 72, 73 at this point and still works as hard as he ever has, morning to night. I mean, it's in his blood. It's definitely his gift. But so I grew up in restaurants, and then my mom was actually in the New York City Ballet when she was a young person. And when she got out of the ballet and moved back to Ohio, where she was born and raised, she opened up a dance studio. So my young life was kind of going from my dad's restaurant to my mom's dance studio, and let's sort of like making mozzarella and carottes at my dad's restaurant, or waiting when my mom was finishing her ballet class, or taking my own ballet class. But, I sort of talk about like serving other people
Mhm.
through small businesses, and just, an orientation of like, I'm here to help my neighbors and help the people that I know, is kind of how I grew up. Um, Nonetheless, it was time to explore when college came around, and so I went to NYU for undergrad. And um, essentially, the way that I ended up in Bay Ridge was that I ended up sort of accidentally with a Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies major.
That's amazing.
Um, and that brought me to an internship at the Arab American Association of New York, I think my sophomore or junior year. So it must have been 2009, 2010. And so that was the first time I stepped foot in Bay Ridge, was to intern at the Arab American Association of New York. And after I graduated, I was offered a job there full time, and moved to Bay Ridge to take that job, and the rest is history.
That's amazing. What
Yeah.
made you major in Middle Eastern studies?
So it's a funny story, actually. And to this day, I still don't know if I got it wrong or what happened. But back in the day, this is 2008 when I'm enrolling for my undergraduate courses for my freshman year. And at the time, NYU had slotted me into a liberal studies program, which is sort of like a generic curriculum for the first 2 years. And then for the remaining 2 years, you can, sort of focus on whatever intended major you had. At the time, I was an English major, so I think it was sort of something that was intended to divert people with a more generic major into something else. And it worked, because they sent this curriculum form that said, choose all these courses and choose your class time. And they said specifically, here's a list of world cultures, rank them in order of interest, 1 through 5. And here are preferred class times starting at 8 a.m. and going to 2 p.m. Rank them in order of your preference.
Wow.
I rank Middle Eastern studies last, and I rank 8 a.m. last, and I get put into an 8 a.m. Middle Eastern studies course. So
That's
to this
great.
day, I'm still unclear. I'm like, did I read it wrong? Was it a trick that was designed to sort of catch me in some kind of bias? I don't know. But I got into this 8 a.m. Middle Eastern studies class. And, I think it was just one of those moments where here was a culture I knew nothing about functionally, particularly growing up in a almost entirely white, almost entirely rural area in Northeast Ohio. But I was also a kid that had grown up in the aftermath of 9/11. And so I had kind of inherited, or rather absorbed, all these ideas and images about Muslims and about Arabs, but of course had never actually sat down and learned anything substantive about this culture. And so I think there was something about hearing Arabic for the first time as it was, in poetry and in literature and in day-to-day conversation, and learning more about a culture and realizing that I had internalized all of these things over the course of, 18, 19 years of my life, um, and wanting to unlearn, I think, and wanting to dig deeper. And so, at the end of the day, it was time to declare a mate. Well, at first, I had to sort of choose a language track, and I was going to do Spanish because that's what I had taken in high school. But I loved the Arabic, and I thought, why don't I just study that instead? So I chose my language and chose Arabic. And then, about a year or two in, after I realized I was taking all these Middle Eastern studies classes, I said, I'll just major in this. And that's it. That's how I became a Middle Eastern studies major. Yeah.
Arabic fluently?
So I don't speak it fluently. I speak it in a proficient enough way that I can get across basic points, and I can have basic conversations. My pronunciation's pretty good, but my vocabulary can be kind of limited. But I will say that it anytime I'm campaigning and using Arabic, it gets stronger over the course of the campaign. So
That's a,
it's at a pretty good place right now.
so I guess you did very well in Bay Ridge in the Arabic community, the large Palestinian population.
Yeah. Yeah. And I should say, like, that's for your listeners that aren't aware, the reason that the Arab American Association is here in Bay Ridge is because it's the largest Arab community on the eastern seaboard of the United States.
Amazing.
It's a massive community. And so, yeah, so I worked at the Arab American Association for 3 years, then ran a campaign for an Arab candidate in 2017.
About that,
And
Reverend.
yeah, so I did well. Yeah, I did well in sort of, especially the northern areas of the neighborhood this time around.
So in the campaign, that was the Palestinian Reverend, I believe, right when the seat
Yes.
was open, and
Yes.
and you managed that campaign.
I did. Yeah, I
And
did.
I understand Zoran Mamdani was also working with you. So
That's
tell
right.
us
I was his boss.
amazing. That is amazing.
It is.
He
It's
better remember.
wild. What's that?
He better remember that. You're
Oh,
still
he does. He does. It was funny when, it was surreal, I think, for both of us in this year when we were both running, because I had never run before. He, of course, was already a state assembly member, but, um, I would be walking around Bay Ridge, and it would be, a store would have a Zahran Mamdani for mayor sign and a Kayla for council sign. And I would send it to him and go, it's 2017 us is very confused about what's going on right now. But he's sweet about it. He's always like reminding me that I'm his boss. But clearly not anymore. Now we're going to be co-equal branches of government. So
absolutely. Yeah, well, it's interesting, but that race was very close. I think Justin Brennan won it, right? So, how close was it? Was it?
it was about 700 votes. So it was a respectable showing, I think, by our side in terms of, the candidate's name was Qadr El Yatim. He was a widely known figure in the Arab community, but also outside of the Arab community. He did a lot of community, just generic Bay Ridge community work. Um, and he, but he had never run for anything before and was not a political figure. He was, known as a religious figure. I mean, when he was campaigning, he would wear his collar. He was Christian. And so he, at the end of the day, I think we ended up being really proud of what we did. And the exercise really was, let's see how much we can galvanize the Arab vote as a vote and as a voting bloc that typically gets overlooked or at that time wasn't prioritized in campaigns. Obviously, much has changed since then.
Yes.
But at the time when we ran him, it was it was sort of a groundbreaking idea that the community would really run its own serious candidate. Yeah.
Was it difficult for him since he was Christian, right? And most of the Palestinians are Muslims in Bay Ridge. So how did that dynamic work?
He was well known in the community, despite whatever religious differences. So in the Arab community, the word that even Muslims would use for him is Abuna, which is our father, basically, calling, just like we would say Father Eliatim. That was how Muslims would refer to him too when in Arabic. He would go to mosques all the time and speak in Arabic, and it was almost like there was no difference, really. I mean, I think people understood, first and foremost, this might not be someone who's the same religion as me, but this is someone from my culture. This is someone that speaks my language, and I think they understood that he was one of them. What was more difficult was in encountering non-Arab, non-Muslim voters who, despite him wearing a collar, campaigning with a
Mhm.
collar, referring to himself as Father K or Reverend Eliatim or however, people still just assumed he was Muslim. And so
Right.
no matter how many times we told people he was Christian, and of course, this is not to say that there would be anything wrong with us running a Muslim candidate. He just wasn't. And so we would talk to people and try to explain that. And they couldn't comprehend that someone could be Arab Christian, despite that there's a very large Arab Christian community in
Yeah.
our neighborhood. But um, it was fascinating. It was a it was a fascinating experience.
Following closely, I was, thinking about all those issues and questions as the campaign was unfolding. So you lost that election,
Yeah.
and then how did you wind up working for Justin Brand, the guy you were campaigning against?
Yeah, yeah. Well, credit to Justin, because Justin could have made a lifelong enemy of me and everybody else involved. But I think he was smart enough to recognize that we had built something very real, and he could make that something that he had to work against moving forward, or he could try to build a unified coalition. And so he went with the latter. And not just with me. He really made, he won his primary, but there was, of course, still a general that he had to win. And he consulted with us about how to bring back that Arab vote that we had woken up during the primary. He brought in a lot of the same organizers and a lot of the same people to just, be involved and consult the campaign and volunteer. And then when he won, which even that, by the way, was a pretty close election that year in the general,
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, he then sort of tried to figure out how to carry on, that unity that he had encouraged. And one of the ways that he did that was by hiring me, which I at the time was in law school at night and working at an anti-poverty foundation in the day. I went to New
Which
York Law School. Yeah,
great.
New York Law School, best evening
Amazing.
program in the city. I'll fight anybody on that for sure.
I went to Brooklyn Law part time when I graduated, but and New York Law has a good program.
Brooklyn Law
So
has a great program too. I applied to Brooklyn. New York Law gave me more money, so that's where that's where I ended up going.
looking at so
Yeah.
he hired you as were you his counsel or were you
I was deputy chief of staff then because I was still going to law school. So I would work for him in the daytime and go to school at night. So I was deputy chief of staff, and I kept that position for 2 years. I think no, maybe 2 to 3 years. And then when I graduated law school and passed the bar, it was always my intention to practice. You were a part-time law student. It's
I hope
an incredibly difficult undertaking.
Really?
So I went through that and felt like I just put myself through the gauntlet. I really need to just make sure that I practice so that I utilize this. And, if I had been through by that point a tumultuous nonprofit job, a tumultuous campaign job. And I was like, I need to make sure I have the license to do something stable and in my control. And so when I graduated and passed the bar, I went to go work at the New York City Law Department, and was a litigator for about 3 years.
Oh wow, that's really impressive. And so when you ran in this campaign, you weren't working for Justin. You took a break from the club council.
So I work for Justin, I graduate. Then I work for Corp Counsel for 3 years. And then when because 3 years is the commitment when you work for the law department. And when that 3 years was up, Justin and others by that point had started making entreaties to me about running for this seat. And so instead of continuing at the law department where there would have been a ban on me running for any kind of office, I left the law department, came back to Justin's office, and continued working for him while I prepared to run.
That's great. That's a great story. And what I'll tell you, and I mean to be patronizing, but your experiences are really unique for this job. You really got quite a background, the law background, working for a nonprofit, the Arabic speaking uh, proficiency. It's really the people in Bay Ridge are lucky to have you there.
I
Because
appreciate it.
usually, I haven't been very complimentary about many of the council members, their backgrounds, and you really have a really impressive resume.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so tell us about the campaign. First of all, when you talked about Justin winning the general election
Yeah.
back then, I could understand it because it had Dyker Heights and Lower Bensonhurst in the district. That's where I used to struggle there as a 15-year councilman. I ran and got reelected there a couple of times,
Yeah.
but in Dyker Heights, which is such a heavily Republican area, we did so much work there, and we were able to squeak victory. Those EDs would win, 55-45. So, that part of the district is no longer in the council. So you're it makes your life a lot easier electorally, no doubt about it.
Absolutely. And yeah, no question. I mean, you ran in a tougher district for sure. Justin ran in a tougher district twice.
Yeah.
For sure. It after the redistricting of 2023, instead of Dyker Heights and Bensonhurst, we got Coney Island, Seagate, and then just a small strip of Dyker Heights, Bensonhurst, Bath Beach, and Gravesend. That is a much more Democratic district for sure by the numbers. It comes with its own set of challenges from a governing perspective, for sure. But yeah, I mean, you all had it twice
Well,
as hard, three
uh,
times as
it
hard.
was brutal. It was brutal. I mean, my wife did a lot of door-to-door canvassing there, so did I, and we were able to squeak out a victory. The district, but when I represented it, Kayla, had almost 200,000 people in it. It
Yeah,
was it
right.
was it was also Sunset Park was in my district. Up
Oh,
to
right, because it went further north. Right,
Yeah,
right, right, right.
it was a much, but we only had 35 council members at the time, so
That's right. That's right.
were much larger. And actually, what what helped me win was the Puerto Rican community in Sunset Park.
Yeah.
Had really good relationships there because I taught there, and they came out heavily for me to beat Angelo Arcurio, who was the Republican minority leader at the time. But having Sunset Park was very, very tough. And the Bay Ridge Towers, which, as I told you, I did very, very well there. I know you have that. You have that in your district too, which is great. Great
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Tell me about the challenges. I mean, you've got two distinct, diff- different neighborhoods, really. Coney Island and Bay Ridge. How
Mhm.
all that, and what are the issue? What are the different issues
Yeah.
in the areas?
Well, I mean, on the one end of the district, you've got a lot of low density single family homes. People forget in Bay Ridge, you also have a lot of huge rent stabilized buildings too. But Bay Ridge is kind of known for these swaths of, single family homes. And then on the other end, you've got one of the highest concentrations of public housing in all of New York City, in Coney Island. And so poverty is a much I mean, not that we're immune from that in Bay Ridge, but poverty is a much bigger issue on the Coney Island side. Um, Sometimes people think transit is rough on our end of the district in Bay Ridge. It's much, much tougher on the West End in Coney Island. There's safety issues look very different between the two neighborhoods. Um, for sure, we're a pro public safety district regardless, but in Bay Ridge, it's a lot of quality of life concerns, homelessness concerns, just some home invasions and things like that,
Yeah.
isolated often. On the other end of the district, it is a lot of still, unfortunately, gun violence issues. So they're really very different, and that's why it's important to have district offices in both sides of the district. You cannot ask Coney Island people to come to Bay Ridge, and I think there would be a revolution if Bay Ridge people had to go to a Coney Island office. Um, so, it you have to have staff on both sides. You have to have staff who know how, are from those districts, who know how to respond to those problems and issues. And you have to be a good listener. You know,
Do you have budgeting for two offices?
I do. So this was a win that Justin secured when he won in 2023. He got an office on Mermaid Avenue, and the council approved that and signed a lease for Mermaid Avenue. And then, we have our office on 82nd and 3rd in Bay Ridge. I actually just confirmed today that leases are being renewed for both offices. So I will be able to hold on to those. Thank God, because
That's
that's what
great.
people deserve. Yeah.
I could not do that in my day. We only had budgeting for one office. Justin, really, that's a big achievement.
Yeah,
And
he really, yeah. And I think to some extent the council, they do it often when a district spans two boroughs. They recognize that, like, it's not possible to
right,
ask people to go to one or the other. So I think the council's been supportive. Back in your day too, the council office rent came out of your own budget.
it
Now
did.
the speaker pays for it. I don't even want to know what your line items for staff were. I bet it was awful. I can't imagine.
You
But
guys are in much better shape.
it's one of those things though that, and I think you understand and appreciate that. I understand the concern about sort of bloated government and higher staff lines and more overhead for the council. I don't know that people realize that really does translate into better access to local government,
Yeah.
which when done right,
Yeah. The problem, Kayla, is that in the old days, I'm not sure it's being done now. There were a lot of people that were getting paid and doing nothing, no
right,
show jobs, part-time jobs to get health benefits, and they never really did any work. So,
yeah,
it depends on how you use the staff. I
for
mean,
sure.
obviously, the city council is, as you know, the closest position to neighborhood issues.
That's right.
You are the ombudsman for the community, so you really need good staff. You need to, facilitate services for the area. Uh, what committees do you want to serve on? Are you any?
My top three committees are Parks, Sanitation, and Government Ops. So Parks is for sure, we have an enormous amount of green spaces in the district. On the Coney Island side, we've got the boardwalk. We've got a lot of street trees that we need to attend to, or that we need to plant on
All
the
right.
Coney Island side. Two things with parks. One, I want to get working, safe, and clean bathrooms in our major parks and playgrounds from an accessibility standpoint, from a family standpoint. You know very well that is an extraordinarily expensive undertaking,
Yeah.
which I still, for the life of me, don't fully understand. And so that's something that I want to work on with parks. And especially because Justin redid a lot of the parks and playgrounds. And so because the bathrooms are so expensive, often when you redo a park or playground, the bathroom is an entirely separate capital expenditure because it's such a huge undertaking on its own. So he got a lot of it out of the way. I get to focus on bathrooms, which is great. But the other parks issue, which I feel like you will appreciate, is the management of street trees is done by the forestry
Oh my
division,
God.
which lives within parks. You know, it's one of the most frustrating things to deal with in the council's office.
Oh my God.
People call and they're like, this branch is hanging down, this tree is lifting my sidewalk, and parks is, forestry, which is within parks' response is usually like, all right, well, it's scheduled for a pruning in 3 years, see you then. And you're like, what on earth this? And Sally, you have to understand, I was a law department attorney and in tort, so I saw the cases where branches would fall on people's heads and cause head injuries or trip over sidewalks with like lifted tree roots. So I know how much money it costs the city to not take care of our street trees on the liability side of things. So I want to still figure out, I know it's a funding issue. I know that there's some structural issues with forestry, but like we have to fix it.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
a
it's basically a funding issue, right? There's not
right.
enough. Why can't we increase the budgeting for to deal with trees in the city for all the reasons you mentioned? I mean,
Yeah.
also, the roots are coming through sidewalks. I mean, it's crazy,
Yeah.
and it's
It is crazy.
frustrating. So maybe you can
Yeah.
you can champion that. That would be fantastic.
There's an effort underway to make parks a permanent 1% line of the city's budget.
That's
It should
been
have happened a long
that's
time
been the
ago.
story. That's been a story forever,
Exactly.
and it never happens.
And it's never happened. And I think we're reaching the point where it like we're starting to realize the effects of it. Like we have to do it. What I hear, and this upsets me, but what I hear often is that if tomorrow, or rather, if this budget cycle, we were to institute that and make parks 1% of the city's budget, parks would have no idea how to manage that amount of resources. But to me, that's no excuse. We have to figure that out. We have an enormous amount of green spaces. We have so many trees. We need the resources to be able to manage it. And if we have to restructure how the department is, if we have to figure out different management, I don't know what it is, but like there shouldn't being unable to manage an amount of money is not an excuse to not give an underfunded department what they need to run it properly. Um
Kayla, if you can accomplish that, you'll never lose an election in New York City again.
I hope you're right.
You will never lose an election in New York City. Uh,
Yeah.
you, uh, I noticed that in a debate with your opponent, you said something which hit a chord with me.
Mm,
Working in the co-op council is the tons of frivolous lawsuits that the city does not challenge, right? Which could save a ton of money. Can you just speak to that a bit? It bothers me for years. People,
absolutely.
here's
Yeah.
30,000, here's 40,000, go away. I mean, what's your take on it?
So, and I want to be clear that I love the law department. The court counsel job that I had was the best job I have ever had, and we will see how being a council member compares to it. But it is a phenomenal department. It's a phenomenal agency. And they utilize their attorneys, their young attorneys in particular, very well. As you go in as a young attorney, you are not just researching and filing papers. They throw you right into court.
Wow.
I was a first or second year attorney doing trials. I mean, they make the best use of what they have. There are two problems, which is one, there are some issues within the administrative code that bar us from being able to challenge certain lawsuits effectively, and I'll get back to that. And two, there used to be, when the law department was fully resourced, when there were more attorneys, when it was at its heyday, there used to be more of a practice of taking cases to trial and fighting cases in trials. That is much less of the practice now. It is much more common to settle cases.
Well, why
Out.
staff? Because of staffing? Because of
Yes.
staffing?
You have to remember, I joined as an attorney post COVID. So there had been massive losses of attorneys, particularly when the city overall, not just the law department, didn't adjust to work from home particularly well. So we lost a lot of people there. The law department pay has never been on par with the private sector. But at some point, it started to lag behind a lot more. And as you know, now any new attorney that joins is tier 6 in the pension as opposed to tier 4, tier 5. So the benefits aren't even what they used to be. And so I think we're still having a hard time attracting the kind of, top tier talent that the law department used to be able to get very easily. And, the amount of lawsuits has also ballooned. And then, with holdups in the court, especially post COVID, it's hard to get trial dates. It's difficult to do that. Picking a jury lasts so much longer than it used to in a lot of these counties. So all of that to say, the law department just doesn't have the resources that it used to have in order to really take a lot of these cases to trial. So
Isn't it penny wise and pound foolish because the city spends a ton more money settling these cases? That if
that's
they
right.
had adequate staff to challenge some of these frivolous lawsuits, they would save a ton of money, I would think.
Yes, that is exactly my position. Is that if we beefed up the law department, we would see more in terms of, initial expenditures on salary and resources, et cetera. But if we gave them what they needed, they would be able to fight all these suits. And we can also make changes to the administrative code. So, a particularly nerdy idea that I have, if you'll follow along with me,
I love it.
um,
Yeah, please.
is
I love this stuff.
so there is a terrible thing that I think happens every day when people sue the city. Um, so Sal, if you trip and fall on a pothole, a defect in the roadway, or a
Hmm.
defect on city hardware, right? The standard is prior written notice.
Right.
And what that means functionally is, was the city aware of the defect, and did they have adequate time in order to go out and cure the defect that would have prevented the accident from taking place? The idea being, we can't constantly punish the city for defects that they have no idea exist. It's a very big city, it's difficult to manage. But if the city knew and didn't act quickly enough, then you, Sal, are owed because you're a taxpayer. You pay money to into the city. They should be able to fix that for you so you're safe, right? That all makes total sense. Prior written notice as a standard makes total sense. However, the plaintiff's bar has gotten very frustrated over the years, had gotten, I should say, with how difficult it was to prove that the city had prior written notice of a defect. It requires foiling all kinds of documents. It requires, proving that DOT spoke to Parks, spoke to DEP, whatever. Fine, it's a difficult case to bring. So what did they do? Um, they commissioned a map making agency called Sanborn
Yes.
to send out a bunch of minimum wage paid people with a notepad and a pen throughout all 5 boroughs of New York City and mark down every single little defect that they saw, compiled it into one document that was thousands and thousands of pages long, called the Big Apple Map,
Hmm.
and then served it upon the city, as far as legal service of process,
Right.
served it upon the city and said, here you go. Here is prior written notice of every single defect in the city of New
Yep.
York. And they did this, I can't remember, it was in the early 2000s that they did the first map. And believe it or not, the courts upheld it as a form of prior written notice.
Hmm.
Now, practically, Sal, if I sat down with you and said, I'm going to give you a list of all of the things that you have done wrong in the last 365 days. All of them. Everything you've done wrong. If you showed up late to a meeting, if you didn't do this, if you didn't do that. Are you able to fix all of it? You're not going to remember all of it. You're not going to be able to attend to all of it. Our argument is that notice of all the defects in the city all at once is notice of nothing,
Hmm.
because the city can't practically respond to all of these issues. But the courts upheld it, and they have continued to uphold it. So they did the first edition of the Big Apple map in the early 2000s. Then they re-upped it, I think, in the 2011 or 2012, and I can't remember if it's been updated since. But they've just kept doing this map. So practically, if you're a law department attorney, this comes across your desk. You see you get a case that says, all right, Sal tripped on, the corner of 45th Street and Fifth Avenue on a pothole that was, in the middle of the roadway
Hmm.
while he was or in the crosswalk, let's say, while you're crossing the street. And I would go to the Big Apple map and check that intersection and see if there was the right marking for a pothole from God knows what year, collected by whom,
Hmm.
and then that would decide the outcome of the case. Because if we had prior written notice through this Big Apple map per the courts, then
So how do you?
okay, like,
So what do
very
you?
hard to
How do you?
fight in
So
trial.
what do you want to do about it? You want?
So the administrative code is what provides for prior written notice. It's called Administrative Code 7201. And so I want to tailor the administrative code to essentially say there cannot be mass aggregate notice. There has to be individualized notice of an individual defect collected at, a specific time.
Mm.
It cannot be, essentially notice of hundreds of thousands of defects all at once, because it does not give the city adequate opportunity to cure the defect. Keep in mind, adequate time to cure the defect is something like 15 days or 30 days. I can't remember
Ridiculous.
what it is. So it's like, if you give me thousands, hundreds of thousands, or tens of thousands of defects all at once, there's no way the city of New York is curing this in 15 to 30 days. We all know this, but ultimately what this means is that, plaintiffs win out on these things that we never had the opportunity to cure. Plaintiffs' attorneys are getting 30%, so they get their second and third houses in Florida off of this. And the taxpayers are the ones that lose,
So you're,
you know? Um,
that's a great issue. Of course, the plaintiffs bar is not going to be happy with you, but it's a great issue. It's a great issue for New York City taxpayers. And by the way, if these lawsuits, these frivolous lawsuits, are challenged, you're going to see less and less of them, right? Because
that's
plaintiffs
right.
lawyers are going to say, "I can't do this because I have to go to trial and I'm going to lose." So I hope you pursue it. I think it's great. Shifting gears, my
Yeah.
sisters are thrilled about the fast ferry, and they give you credit for it, not Justin.
Yay. We
I,
both deserve credit. I
uh,
appreciate it, but we both deserve credit. I'm thrilled about the Fast Ferry too.
yeah,
We for listeners that aren't aware, the ferry system's getting redesigned, and the new system will take effect December 8th. We fought really hard in Bay Ridge to make sure that this was an expansion for us, given that we've got a lot of people who live close to the water, where the
yeah,
walk to the R train pretty far, and people use the ferry a lot down here. And so we will now have all day 25-minute express service
that's
to Wall
amazing.
Street. We're also gaining access to the west side of Manhattan for the first time ever. I think it's going to be West 42nd Street or West 34th Street. And then we're also gaining access to Staten Island. In the process, we're losing a few stops along the South Brooklyn route that a lot of people have mostly used recreationally. And some folks are upset about that. But listen, the ferry is a highly subsidized mode
It
of
really is. It
transportation.
really is. Just to give you some
Yeah.
ancient history, you weren't even born
Yeah.
then, I don't think. Ed Koch and I on 69th Street announced a ferry service back in the 80s because I was a big
Oh my
advocate of
God.
it. And it started and then it collapsed because there
Mm,
was no money to fund it. The city
yeah.
had to, pony up a lot of
Yeah.
cash. What you guys
Yeah.
did is amazing. I mean, I remember taking me, June Iceland, who's passed away, who was the chair of the
Mm,
transportation committee, and Koch, big press conference, lasted about 6 months and it
mm,
disappeared. So I'm glad that what you guys have done is revived it and made it a functional means of transportation. And it is
yeah.
expensive. There's no doubt about it. One final question before you go. Have you announced who you would support you for speaker, or you haven't made a decision yet? I'm sure
I have
you've been hounded. You're being hounded by folks.
yeah. I haven't announced.
Do you,
I have said I think it should be a woman because it is a majority woman council, and I'm also the first woman to win to represent Bay Ridge in the city
yes,
council.
yes, you are.
Um, So I think it's important that we have a woman as a speaker. I think it's important that it's someone who's interested in building up the council's power, because I
Mhm.
think the council, as a co-equal branch of government, is kind of losing some of that over time. And I think it's someone who both wants to work productively with Sahran Mamdani and also be willing to be that check. Um, and we've got a good number of candidates who fulfill all of those roles.
That's a great
So
political answer, Kayla. I love it. You're going to be very successful. Uh, it's a great
I
answer.
appreciate it.
I
I need
love
more
that.
tips from you, but I'll call
I
you.
know
We'll
I
figure.
wasn't very good at it. No, don't take tips from me. I was not a really good politician. I was in the doghouse most of the time with the
Yeah,
leadership.
Sal, people love you though. I still
Well,
have people that talk to me all the time and say, "Oh, he was my favorite." So, you did something right.
I
That's for sure.
delivered for the neighborhood. I mean,
That's right.
I delivered for the neighborhood, and being independent, I was able to do things and say things that nobody could say, but the neighborhood appreciated. Even after I voted for the gay rights bill, which caused me a huge amount of problems back in
Good for you
1980
though.
in the
Good for you.
80s. But you're gonna be great. I have a lot of confidence in you. I could tell your background's amazing, and I'll be following you. So I'm glad you're representing my old neighborhood. So
I
Kayla,
appreciate you.
thanks very much, and good luck. Good luck to you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for having
All
me.
right, bye.
Bye.